I just want to welcome everyone here. And what I'd love people to do is if you could introduce yourself in the chat. I see got people from Boston, people from Brooklyn, people from Maryland, people from Florida, East Coast represent all over the place. And I'll be there very soon, actually. But I'm calling in from Paris, so I'm not there in person. I'd love if you could introduce yourself in the chat. Dallas, Texas, what's up? An airport larger than New York City. Kenya, fantastic. If you could let me know like what type of work you do and what you're interested in, why you're here today. Are you an ML engineer? Have you like started thinking about AI and you're a product manager and want to incorporate into your workflows? That will really help me understand what you're up to and what you're interested in, and what's up there. I'm here to answer any questions you have in the chat as we continue. After the fact, if you want to come and ask more questions, feel free to in the GitHub repository, which I'm about to share. Also, feel free to, I've just shared our community Discord workspace and server where you can come and ask any questions there. And there are a lot of people there who work on these types of things who can answer questions in addition to me, if you're interested. So let me just get up the GitHub repository link to share with you as well. It's already super cool to see that we have data scientists, people in robotics, hardware, automated testing, wanting to do it better. Fantastic. This is all about doing things better, right? This is nascent technology. We're figuring out together how to build more reliable software. Medical literature, looking to build bespoke small solutions for your company. Greg, that's fantastic. And what we're going to see is actually how we can build systems to start interrogating our own data. And I do think one of the biggest wins we've found and some of the most value that can be delivered through current AI foundation models and LLMs in particular is being able to like query our own internal documents and wikis and Slack threads and PDFs, as we'll see as well. Great to see we've got a PM for drug discovery, senior business analyst, transformation leader, Runa. Great to have you in the room. So this is the GitHub repository I'll be showing you and working from today. Now, the intention of this workshop is not for you to code along in real time. If you want to do it, you can spin up a code space, definitely, and do it, or clone the repository. But I actually suggest you watch and ingest and we chat about it, because getting all the technical stuff set up and running actually will distract significantly for your experience of learning and us discovering together in this workshop. That's not to say don't do it, but we're not here to support that, and we're here to engage with the material more than to run the code yourself. But definitely ask questions after the fact, join the Discord, or ask questions in the repository in order to get up and running with all the code as well. So Elle, I am going to now go to GitHub. So if you wouldn't mind sharing my screen, that would be fantastic. Awesome, everyone. So Elle, can you confirm you can see GitHub now?
Yes.
Your microphone. Yeah, I can see that. Fantastic. Yeah, it's all good.
So anyone who wants to code along later, I describe in here how to do it. And this repository is called, because we first created this repository for a workshop for software engineers. So we called it AI for software engineers, but it's really for data scientists, machine learning engineers, and so on as well. I'm just going to close that. And what you'll see is if you want to run the code yourself, you can actually spin up a code space here. And we talk about the instructions on how to do that below. But I've already set that all up. And what I'm going to do now is go into my code space, okay? So in this code space, what we're going to see, so if you haven't seen code spaces before, it's kind of like, well, it's kind of like Google Colab, which you may have seen, like notebooks that have environments set up, but for kind of full stack coding. So it looks like VS Code, if you've experienced that, but GitHub and Microsoft have set up all the infrastructure. So you'll see I have my local file system here. I can look at my notebooks in the middle. I can look at my Markdown files. I can look at my Python scripts. And I've also got terminals and that type of stuff. So it's really like a fully fledged IDE. in the browser, which is pretty cool with access to all the compute resources that Microsoft provides. So, and do feel free to ask questions in the chat. Because I am on the road, I've actually got one screen currently, so I can't see the chat at the moment. But Elle has said that I'll check it every now and then, and Elle has said that she'll she'll turn the microphone on and say, "Hey, Hugo, there's a question about this." So, with all that having been said, I just want to jump in and start talking about what we're up to, right? So, what we're going to do is we're going to take a comprehensive dive into constructing AI-powered systems using a first principles approach to break down complex ideas into practical, understandable components, okay? So by the end of the session, I hope you'll have hands-on experience developing a generative AI app and a solid understanding of foundational AI concepts. So this is from a blog post of a friend of mine, Hamel Hussein, that we actually did this figure we developed on a podcast a couple of years ago. And it's a virtuous cycle of how we think about LLM-powered applications, where you have your inputs or invocations, which are human inputs or synthetically generated data. And I'm actually giving a talk at ODSC in a couple of hours, in 3.5 hours, I think, on how you can use synthetic data to bootstrap your data flywheel for AI-powered applications. Then you want to start thinking about logging and unit testing, doing evaluation and curation. Then perhaps your iteration will involve prompt engineering, fine-tuning, versioning these together, improving your model, and getting this rapid iterative cycle. And the thing is, this isn't like the software development lifecycle where you'll spec something out and then build it, deploy it, and monitor it, but not really change it so much, and then move on to the next version, right? The virtuous cycle here needs to be fast because our LLM-powered applications are fundamentally based around the data they ingest, which isn't what traditional software is like. So we need to monitor them and update them incredibly quickly. Okay, so what are we going to cover today? And Elle, can you just confirm that? Do you want me to make my font a bit bigger, or is that okay?
It's all okay. We can see that.
Super cool. So, first, what we're going to do, we're not going to do the setup today, just because we don't have as much time. But we're going to run and interact a foundational generative AI app that queries PDFs and documents to generate responses. We're going to start to understand in that process the software development lifecycle for AI applications, and we're going to explore this software development lifecycle, or SDLC, as an iterative, non-deterministic process, and emphasize the importance of continuous evaluation, logging, and iteration. We're going to get into some core concepts and deconstruct retrieval-augmented generation, RAG systems, and then we're going to break down the MVP that we're building and walk through each component of the app. Now, everything we're doing, there's a lot of noise outside, but everything we're doing applies to all LLM-powered systems. If you're building agents, everything we're doing will apply there. In the confines of a 2-hour workshop, though, it's far easier to work with something like RAG than something agentic. Okay? Then we're going to dive into just working a bit more with vendor APIs like OpenAI, Anthropic. Maybe you use Gemini or Grok or these types of things. Think a bit more about prompt engineering. And we're going to explore the major vendor APIs and the differences between endpoints like completion and chat. We're going to experiment with prompt engineering, so adjusting prompts to optimize output and understanding the nuances of input-output relationships. We'll think about structured outputs. We'll talk about embeddings and vector stores. But most importantly, then, we're going to get into logging and evaluation. And this is so important, right? You need to be able to set up logging systems so that you can have introspect into the systems you're building. You want to be able to see, if someone asks a question, you want to be able to see what response it leads to and why. And you want to be able to label that as pass or fail and give a reason. Okay. And you don't necessarily need to do like hardcore robust evaluation from the start, but you do need to do what I'd call a minimum viable evaluation. Okay. So with any MVP, you need an MVE along those lines. And actually, before we dive too deep, I am going to just give you a link to an essay I wrote recently for O'Reilly Radar. I've got a new browser as well, which is all about evaluation-driven development and how to think about such things. Okay. Thank you so much for your kind words, Eric. I really appreciate it. So this is an essay that I wrote recently, kind of from all the, dozens of companies I've been working with to build LLM-powered apps and teaching and consulting over the past couple of years. Okay, that's not quite where I wanted to go back. We wanted to go back here. But the idea is that you just want to have a basic way to evaluate. And why do you want to do that? So a lot of people come to me and say, oh, my agent isn't doing this, and maybe I need to prompt engineer or fine tune, right? And then we delve, quote unquote delve, we dive into their system and we see that the failure mode really, the biggest failure mode corresponds to how they're ingesting PDFs, the OCR, the optical character recognition. And the biggest lift on their model can be improved by ingesting PDFs better. And it has nothing to do with the agent or the quote unquote infinite RAG system, right? So my only point is, if you log your traces, and by that I mean, everything that's happening within your system, and you're able to even label 20 to 30 of them and say, this was good, this was bad, this was the reason, then you look at the bad ones in a spreadsheet, you have the reason, you do a pivot table, and you can see that, the biggest failure mode wasn't hallucinations. It was the optical character recognition. That's all I'm talking about. And that's something I'll go into a lot more detail in my talk later today, if you want to join that. So, look, this is enough out of me, right? By way of introduction, let's actually look at our first app, okay? Now, what I'm telling you how to get your OpenAI key. You can use any provider you want, actually, but I've already done that. And what we're going to do is we're going to use Llama Index. That's a particular package and framework and library. And they're kind of their quick start, essentially, to build like a basic RAG system in 5 lines of code. So before I run it, let's actually look at the code here. We have, first line is our imports, right? Then we are defining the documents we want. And that's going to be, we're going to use the Llama Index simple directory reader to load in the data. And sorry about this. If we look in data, we can see we have a file called o1.txt, which is the announcement from OpenAI about O1. Then we have hba.txt, which is a copy and paste of my LinkedIn profile, okay? Now, the reason we're going to query my LinkedIn profile isn't because I'm solipsistic or narcissistic. It's because it's a good way to see whether my system's working. I know what the responses should be there. So for me to be able to evaluate it, it's actually a very good way to do that, okay? So I'm sorry, I want to go back to the code here. Then what we do is we create some sort of index, right? And this actually creates a basic vector store, a vector database. We don't need to go into that too much now, but what it does is it creates something from the documents, all of these files in the data directory that allows me to query them. Then we set up the query engine. Then what I do is I pass this question into the query engine and get the response and print the response. So look at this. Import aside, I've got 5 lines of code, and this is going to allow us to query any text document we put in there. So let me now run this with Python 1 app query.py. Now, hopefully the demo gods aren't as spiteful and vengeful today as they can be. Great. So I've said, what is O1? And it's looked at the document and said a new large language model called OpenAI O1 trained with reinforcement learning to perform blah, blah, blah. Okay, that's good. Now, to show that it's not canned, I'm just going to say, who is Hugo? I'm going to change the question, save the file again, and run this. Hugo Bowne-Anderson is an independent data and AI scientist, consultant, writer, educator, podcaster. That's good enough and probably what my LinkedIn profile says. Okay, that's cool. Now, remember, we can build like an app where I can put these in the command line or have a front end that we can build, and we're going to do that in the second app, actually. So we're going to start building things up. But what we're doing here is just editing briefly in the file. I'm going to now ask, who is Bill? I've got no idea what this is going to do, but hopefully it'll say, like, the documents don't mention Bill, so I can't tell you anything about Bill. I hope it'll say that, but there may be a Bill mentioned somewhere. Okay, cool. So that's great. What we see is there is no mention of anyone named Bill in the provided context information. So that's super cool. So we've just seen that using 5 lines of code, we can build a simple system that ingests any text document, and we can query it and answer questions about it. Now, before going on, I do want to say that this is something I talk about a lot in this essay. This is kind of what I'd call proof of concept purgatory. Okay, so the way I think about what's happening here is that we actually have a very flashy demo. In 5 lines of code, we've been able to, build something super cool, right? But what happens next, as a function of time, our excitement or dopamine, then we're like, oh, we want basic functionality. Then we want to deal with hallucinations. Then I have monitoring challenges. Then I can't integrate it into my stack. So we actually have pretty serious diminishing returns on excitement here. And this is an inversion of classic software where there's no excitement at the start. Then you build in basic features, then you add unit tests, then you scale and optimize, then you load balance, for example, right? And a lot of the work I do in my consulting and education, I don't want to change anything in this figure except make sure that after flashy demo, we go up and to the right. We keep going there, okay? And how do we do that? I'm going to give you a sense of several ways today, okay? So going back to the notebook, I have a step-by-step explanation of what happened in this app that we just wrote. But essentially, there are so many things happening. We've abstracted over chunking the text. We've abstracted over creating a vector store. We've abstracted over setting up the query engine. On top of that, it's not even clear to me what prompt is being sent to the LLM. Like, I've asked it something, but it's created llama indexes, then combining that with, the text and embeddings or something along those lines. And I don't even know what's going there. And it's difficult to intercept that. So when I help people build these types of systems, I often get them, and this is a pattern I've seen time and time again, people doing the end is ripping out llama index and building this system from the ground up by yourself. Having said that, for the purposes of this workshop, because we want to move quickly, we're going to start adding more to it. And for those who want to play around with this afterwards, there are exercises here on personalizing your queries, and you can add your own LinkedIn profile and that type of stuff. So before adding the front end, I just want to say a bit about kind of the background of what we've done here. It's retrieval augmented generation, and that's just jargon for having a generative process that queries a queries data, essentially. So we're putting in structured data, maybe some unstructured data, putting it into chunks, then we're doing some sort of embedding, okay? And what that means is it takes text and tokens and words and turns them into numbers. We get some sort of embedding space, right? We put that in a NumPy array or a database, and they're called vector databases, particular type of database, which allows us to query quite well. But then what happens in that mathematical space, in that vector space, is when we ask a question, it will look for which chunks are closest to that question in some sense, using some sort of semantic similarity. And I don't want to go into too many details there, but that's essentially part of the power of vector databases, right? Then we have the retrieved chunks, and these chunks are sent with the query to the model, and then we get the generative response, okay? So that's what's happening there. And once again, it's wonderful to have this flashy demo, but so much of that is abstracted over that if you're trying to introspect into your system, it's not enough, right? You definitely need more, and we'll see how that plays out over the next hour and a half, okay? So as I said, the cool thing about this setup is it abstracts away a lot of the complexity, such as embeddings, vector databases, chunking. But as we build an experiment, we just need to be mindful that we're not getting stuck in proof of concept purgatory, where we have a great proof of concept, but never progress to a fully integrated, scalable solution. So having said all that, what do I want to do now? I want to introduce you to, has anyone seen Gradio? And before I do this, I'm just going to go to the chat, and I appreciate this infinity screen now. Megana has a great question. Where can I find the resources notebook? I've actually put the GitHub link in a comment here. I don't know how we can pin that, but you can see it's just up above there. So there's the GitHub there. So please do check that out. And then you can see above that, I've also linked to a Discord server I have where a lot of people build with me, and we're all happy to answer questions around this stuff as well. And Eric has responded there. Disha has had a great question. Any specific reason for selecting Llama Index? No specific reason besides it's easy to get up and running with to demonstrate these types of things. And in fact, love Llama Index, love the people at Llama Index, but in the end, as I've said, a lot of the best products out there end up hand rolling their own systems. And at the risk of maybe, this is not quite safe for work, but I mean, I'm quoting something verbatim. So this is a post that I'll link to that my friend Hamill wrote called, well, I'm not going to say it, but you can see the title there. LOL. It's actually very important to read. I don't necessarily suggest you follow all his suggestions around how to intercept the prompt, but a huge issue we've had in the space is using frameworks such as Llama Index, but many others, that mean you can't see the prompts you're sending to the LLM, as I spoke to earlier. And that's one of the reasons that we really tend to hand roll these things ourselves for what that's worth. Okay, so what we're going to do now, I love this. So the next steps will be, we're going to add a front end, right? So that we can ship things really easily and have a cool user experience. And then we're going to add like some sort of backend. We're going to add a database where we can start logging our things and start having a look at the conversations we're having. Okay. So actually, before I even show you the code to run the front, I'm going to show you how many lines it is. Okay. So this code is 41 lines long, including imports. And we'll talk through the code in a second, but what it allows me to do is have a little front end using something called Gradio. Maybe can people tell me if they've had experience with Gradio in the chat? So you can see now I've got something running on a local URL. And in fact, I'm doing all this from the code space, which is pretty darn cool. I'm going to click on this and look at this, everyone. I'm a huge fan of this. So I now can drop a file here and query it. So I've got, where is this? I've got a collection of LinkedIn profiles. Okay, so I'm just going to choose one and drop it there. So we can see it's ingested there. I'm going to ask a question. Because I'm lazy, this is a form of good lazy, I think. I'm going to use something called Super Whisper to ask the question so I don't have to type it. Who is in this LinkedIn profile? So I'm asking that question and I'm clicking submit. We can see it's processing it. Rahul Asati is the individual featured in the LinkedIn profile. Very cool. If I wanted to extract structured output about their roles in order to reach out, in order to see if they match positions I'm hiring for, tell me what type of structured output I could extract. So this is just another question. I'm asking it, right? You could extract structured output related to the individual's role, such as their their past role. Great. Now I'm going to show you something slightly wacky. You might think, okay, I'm going to say, cool, can you do this for me? Can anyone tell me what happened there? I asked it a few questions and I said, cool, can you do this for me? And then it gives me a really weird response. I'd love if someone in the chat can tell me what they think happened here. And Amar, all the instructions are in the notebook, but I don't suggest you code along here. As I said at the start, I suggest you follow along and then code along after. Feel free to now, but we can't support questions around all the questions around setup. Okay, yes, you're all hitting the nail on the head. There's no statefulness. There's no history in it. It has no memory, essentially. And that's really important to recognize, that when we're pinging APIs, there's no memory in these systems, right? We may think when we chat with ChatGPT, there's memory there, Claude, there's memory there. Of course there is, because memory has been built into those systems. And in fact, let me take you to, I presume many of you have seen Anthropic's blog posts, Building Effective Agents. But this last December, Barry and Eric at Anthropic really gave some clarity to how we're all thinking about agents, in that we really have, before agents, augmented LLMs, which have memory, retrieval, and tools, right? So when we have input and output, the first thing we want to do a lot of the time is create some form of memory. We may not always, we may just want single turn conversations. And I will share the link to this in the chat. StreamYard is continually offering me to share a referral link, which is, I mean, these engagement tactics are killing me, people. So having said all that, let's go back. So we've created this app, right? Which is cool. We can chat with our documents, which is super cool. I can't currently introspect into my system. I don't know how to improve it. I don't know what prompt's actually being sent there, right? But I just want to show you a bit about the code. And in fact, I'll show you in the notebook, because I talk through the code in the notebook. So remember in the first iteration, we were using Llama Index to query, and we're doing it from the command line. Now what we're doing is we added a front end with Gradio, added a simple Gradio interface, and we're doing PDF handling with PyMu PDF or FITS, right? So instead of manually working with the text, we're extracting text directly from the PDFs, okay? So with just a few lines of code, we've created a user-friendly interface, a file upload component, a text box, and a button. Now, I do want to show you those here. So we have the extracting text from PDF, then process PDF, then the query. But look at Gradio is so cool. Look at this. Look how many lines of code I need to just generate this basic front end that allows me to ship data, ML, and AI-powered products. Fantastic. And you may have seen that when it served me the URL, I can actually create a public link using set share that allows me to, I'm in Paris now. I could share it with my mom or my partner in Australia, and they can interact with the products that I'm building in real time, right? Now, Gradio isn't necessarily something I'd ship to production with, but it's incredible for these types of prototypes. So I'm glad that some of you have played around with it before, and because it's made and supported by Hugging Face, where actually I was at Hugging Face for lunch today as well, because they're based in Paris. One of the main offices is there, but it integrates so wonderfully with the entire Hugging Face ecosystem. And so I've got tasks for you to do afterwards, if you're interested in doing so, to create a PDF of your LinkedIn profile, upload and query it, and see what's up there. So before starting to log things and introspect into our system, I just want to say a bit. We've been pinging an API, and I've been sending, if I wanted to work with personal data, I've perhaps been sending personal data to an API that maybe I'm not comfortable with, right? So I just want to show you how you can protect yourself a bit more with data privacy and security preservation, right? So what we're going to do next, as a slight detour, is use Hugging Face embeddings for efficient local text representation. And we're going to incorporate the Llama API to query the PDF with an advanced large language model like Llama 2. And we're going to use Llama 3 today, actually. But I'm wondering if anyone has experience with Llama. Maybe you can let me know in the chat. Awesome, I'm back. So yeah, your question is, I'm using GitHub code spaces in Arc. Yes. And the intention is so that you can all code within your browser, okay? Okay, I'm back here and I want to go to this active code space I have. And while that takes a second, I just do want to show you around Ollama, okay? So Ollama is a wonderful, wonderful tool that allows us to get up and running with large language models super quickly and locally as well. So I actually got a new laptop recently. I got a new MacBook Pro M4 Pro with 128 gigabytes of unified memory, okay? So Elle, can you just confirm you can see my terminal?
Yes, I can see that.
Great. And I just want to show people that what I have locally, I got this laptop a couple of weeks ago and I immediately went home and downloaded some of my favorite models, right? Mistral, Gemma 3 is super cool, came out recently. Mixtral is great. 5.4, all for different purposes, right? And in fact, I can do Ollama, run. I mean, let's just try. I should be able to actually run Mistral, but hey, what's up? Actually, I'm going to be lazy again. Hey, what's up, Mistral? Wow, it's just for some reason started telling me about programming related stuff. I'm actually here teaching a workshop at ODSC East about building LLM-powered software, and I'm taking a slight detour into showing people how to have local models to help them preserve privacy and security with respect to their own data using Ollama, and I'm chatting with you locally on my laptop with Ollama. Awesome. So all I wanted to show you is that, you know, Ollama is an incredible tool for doing stuff locally, among other things. And something I'll link to, and if you join the Discord, actually, you can see there, I've run several workshops on using Ollama with the Gemma team from DeepMind to build agents, but also to experiment with different Gemma models. And the last one we did was building agents with Gemma 3, okay, which is super cool. So all that having been said, let's jump back here. And so what I'm going to do is show you how to do local embeddings with Hugging Face. Then we're going to use Ollama, and we're going to use Llama 3. And then I do want to make clear that for self-hosting, you might think that you can just self-host the LLM call, the generative call at the end, but we saw there are embedding calls you need. So you will need your own embedding model. And that's why the OpenAI API, among other things, is pretty clever and seamless. It seamlessly handles both the embedding and the generative task for you, okay? So when you switch to self-hosted models, you're responsible for managing the embedding step and ensuring it integrates with your LLM, okay? Now, if you really want to, you can do this all in code spaces. You need to do it with a small model though, because the code space doesn't have as much RAM as you'd like or memory, right? So what I'm going to show you is how I did it locally here. So this is just me in Cursor, right? Which is kind of like VS Code, but it has AI assistance built into it. And what you can see here, and this is the same as the code in the GitHub repository, is we're doing the same imports, except we have Ollama now. We're extracting text from the PDF. We're processing the PDF as before, but we're using a Hugging Face embedding here. We're using the All Mini LLM L6 V2. Can I ask, has anyone used this transformers model, this embedding model? I'd love to know. And I do want to show you why. Check this out. Actually, I'm going to go to a... Oh, that's, of course, why. Let me just remind myself what I want to search for. All Mini LM Hugging Face. Now, if you haven't experimented with your own, or not with your own, but with transformers and embedding models you can find online as opposed to using vendor-based ones. Have a play around with this one. Look how many downloads it's had. Over 83 million in the last month, okay? Now, the reason that's important isn't just wow. It means that there's a huge community supporting it and using it as well. So when adopting tools, that's something I want you all to think about. I don't know whether Llama Index or LangChain will be around in 2 years, to be honest. I can tell you this model and these types of models will, okay? So let's go back to Cursor. And what I'm going to do is, so yeah, I have the embedding model there. Then I have the query, and I say I'm going to query it with Llama 3 8B, which I have locally. Okay, so it's running locally for me. Now I can drag and drop the PDF. Tell me about this PDF, or tell me who's in it. This individual is a technologist. Cool. Their experience spans multiple industries and companies, including Western Digital, Cisco, Franklin. Okay, and then I'm going to say, what is the name of this person and what do they do? Because it hasn't told me that. Shankar Peretti is a technologist specializing in AI, ML, and natural language processing, NLP. So I know that was a slight detour. We want to start logging and having multi-turn conversations with our software and LLMs. But I did just want to show you how you can start thinking about having local models, okay? So let's go back to GitHub Codespaces, right? And just to be clear, what we just did there, we had a Gradio set up. We're continuing to use Gradio to provide a clean, simple front end. We're using embeddings and LLMs, but we're doing it locally now, using Hugging Face for local embeddings. We have privacy, self-hosting, also cost efficiency. Now, performance may not be as strong as OpenAI's models, and you need to manage more of the setup, like embedding models. But how good performance do you actually need? I mean, if you want to get to work, maybe you don't need a jumbo jet. Maybe you need a bicycle, right? So that's really how I want you all to be thinking. So what you can do next is run the code yourself, upload your LinkedIn PDF, start to ask more complex questions, and experiment and reflect and play around with queries. Consider the trade-offs, okay? And I've shown you the code, but also you can go to 3applocal.py. You can also try to run it in the code spaces. I did it last night when preparing for this. It got pretty wacky at one point, but it is doable. Try Gemma 2B in order to do it, but it won't be so performant. So now what we're going to do is we're going to add, we saw that we don't have memory in these conversations. We're going to add a key feature, which is conversational memory, which will allow you to have a back and forth conversation with your AI to refine your questions and get more precise answers. Because remember, a lot of the time in AI, people complain that LLMs don't answer your question immediately until you have a conversation with them. I'd say, what are your expectations? And like, when you ask people a question, do they often answer your question in the way you need or would like? I think if we all reflect, the answers probably no most of the time, right? So what we're doing is we're adding in conversational memory, and we're adding a choice of models, right? And we're adding that choice in the simple Gradio front end using a radio button interface. So we'll see what that looks like now. And so we're looking at the app for app Convo, and Convo for conversation, okay? So let's just have a look at this, and then we'll chat about what's happening in the code. Okay, so firstly, you can see I can select which model I want here, right? Now I'm gonna drop a PDF. Whoa. I'll choose one down here. I don't know who it is. Who is this? Submit button down the bottom. It may make sense as an interface to have it a bit up the top, to be honest. This individual is M. Arslan, a senior software engineer in test-based Warsaw, in test-based in Warsaw. Okay, that may be the company name, with over 5 years of experience. Okay, great. So if I wanted to extract structured output to see if they match a positions I have open, what fields could we use? I'm going to submit that. To extract structured output from matching position, the following fields could be utilized. Great. Can you extract structured output, including all of this, in JSON? Super cool. It's given me JSON, and it's given me a little copy button as well. Now, I presume a lot of you will appreciate why we want structured output. But a lot of the time when building these kind of data, machine learning, AI pipelines, we want it in a machine ingestible way, and in a consistent way, right? So irrespective of who it is, whose LinkedIn profile, we want to have the same structure. So that's why we want, one of the many reasons we want structured output, that we could then feed into an email generation or system in order to generate outreach emails, or we could store it locally in order to do that later. There are several things we could do with it. And what we can see now is that we have memory in this conversation, right? Which is super cool. So let's now go back. I'm just going to stop this. I'm going to kill this process. And so essentially the way we're handling this conversation is the query PDF function now has a history parameter, and you can look in the Python file in order to see how it works, but previous interactions are included in the new query to provide context, making the conversation more coherent. So we're actually joining the entire conversation, which in the end, as conversations grow, you won't want to do that. This is the first naive way to do it. There are lots of different patterns, and it's still an active area of research, memory, right, in LLMs and AI. But one really cool way that I've seen doing it, which may seem a bit naive, but is surprisingly effective, is having some sort of like agent LLM, essentially, where you say, you give it a prompt like, I want you to be a memory system, essentially. This is the state of the conversation, turn it into something memory which compresses it but preserves important things, and update it each time you get a new query and a response. But there are lots of ways to approach memory. Those are just a couple of them. And in terms of the model selection, the way we did that is we essentially use an model choice parameter. Okay, so an if elif statement, and we've added a few bits of error handling to make sure it's catching some things, but definitely check that out yourself. Once again, I'd love you to play around with this, to run the code afterwards, to upload your PDF, to ask follow-up questions, switch models and see what's up there, right? So once again, OpenAI's model might perform better with complex, nuanced questions, but you have to have an API key and depends on external services there, whereas a local Olama model provides more privacy and control, but might not be as robust or accurate. Important considerations. So this iteration now brings your app closer to a conversational AI assistant, capable of refining its responses over multiple interactions. Have a play around with it and test it. So I'm just going to, before we get into adding logging and observability, I'm just going to come back to StreamYard to see if there are any questions. Super cool question, Pratik. Which is a good small model for prototyping the agents on systems which are older, slower? I'm not sure what you mean by older, slower, but I mean, I'm slightly biased because actually I'm not that biased. I love Gemma 3. Gemma 3 is so much fun. My go-to open source models are the Gemma models. And at the moment, my go-to API models, it used to be Claude 3.7 Sonnet, but Gemini 2.5, it kind of feels like Python in a way, in the sense that It won't be the best at everything, but it'll be very good at nearly everything. It feels like a Swiss Army knife. So if anyone says to me, what model should I start with? I always say Gemini 2.5 at the moment. So Linda has a wonderful question. What are our limits? What is the maximum size of the document? Let us say, rather than a resume, we are parsing a code from terminal sessions or an entire book. So I can't answer that in the abstract. There are several considerations at play here. The first is, if you're trying to put the whole document in, it depends on the context window of the model, and they have different context windows. A lot of models you can throw whole books into these days, to be honest. But you don't want to be doing that all the time. That's why people say RAG is dead, retrieval augmented generation is dead, because they're like, oh, you can just throw everything into the context. Now, that's not true at all, right? Because you don't get as high precision as you'd like. So remember, with retrieval augmented generation, what you're doing is chunking up your text, storing it in a database, right? And then seeing which parts of that database match your query. And then what you're doing is taking the query and the matches and putting that into the LLM. So in that sense, there are no limits, really. And I think latency could be a concern, but in terms of like storage concerns, there aren't significant limits there. Eric has a great question. What would be a minimum system for local development? What I can tell you, Eric, is that my 3-year-old MacBook Pro that had 16 gigs of unified memory, and they ship with like several core GPUs these days, right? So those things are absolutely great. I do think you want to be careful. You can't do everything locally, to be honest. But if you have 16 gigs of memory and a few GPUs on a laptop, you can get a long way and have a lot of fun. So Amar has a question. Oh, so Amar has a question. That's actually a very good question. The question is, if you have a PDF of a scanned document, do you need to process them? I'm sorry about this infinity screen at the moment. If we're talking much longer, El, perhaps we should remove it, but I don't know if that's necessary because I'll go back to the notebook soon. Do I need to process these documents and extract text tables into docs, PDFs? The short answer is you can, and you can have higher precision there and maybe more introspection into how your system is working. So remember, I'm using PyMU PDF to extract things from a PDF, okay? And I'd encourage you to do that. Having said that, models like Gemini 2.5 and all the new multimodal models, including a lot of open weight ones on Hugging Face, have all these capabilities themselves. But when you do that, you can't necessarily see, you can't introspect into what's happening in that part of the system. And this is something we're going to get to soon with respect to logging, right? You want to be able to see what's happening at every stage of your system. So hand rolling it yourself using something like PyMU PDF, you may be able to evaluate and iterate on your system far better if you do that. Eric wrote chunk size question mark as a limit question mark. I'm not sure what the question is, Eric. It may have had to do with something I said earlier, but I'm not quite sure. So if you could ask a question with a verb, that would help there. What else do I want to say? Let me just go back to so just talking about, once again, this is the essay I wrote that I linked to above, talking about, will models ingest PDFs and that type of stuff. Let me just show you this figure, okay? So this is one example of the anatomy of a modern large language model system, right? Where we have user input going to a front-end UI, then we're sending a prompt and metadata to an LLM. We may be doing context enrichment with Llama Index. There may be memory involved, reading and writing. We may be doing tool calls. We're then doing tracing and monitoring and that type of stuff. And this is relevant because the question about can you just put PDFs into a model? And as I said, increasingly with multimodal models, you can, but then you can't really inspect into this. You can't log all the things happening in that part of the system. And we'll get to what this logging looks like in a minute. But having this idea of what modern systems will look like, I think helps understand that a bit better. Fantastic question, Henry. Yes, Henry Woohoo, and Christian answered it. Once again, I'm sorry for all this jumping around. It's too psychedelic for me. So yes, and Henry, everything we're using is in this notebook as well. So if we go to, yep, we're using PyMU PDF, but you actually import it as fits for historical reasons. Okay. So all that having been said, it's now time to get into observability and logging. Okay. Now, what we're going to do now is store each conversation and message in a local SQLite database. And every interaction will be logged, including the user's queries, the assistant's responses, and any system errors. Gives us complete traces of each session. Okay. We're going to use SQLite for simplicity and set up the database schema to store conversations and messages. In order to observe, we'll be using a tool called Dataset, DATASETTE, that Simon Willison built to explore conversation logs. Dataset's a wonderful tool for exploration, data exploration. And in fact, a lot of data journalists use it as well. It's really great to see the work that Simon's done and all the use cases it's got. I was playing around with this earlier, so we'll see there's a database there. And in the spirit of hopefully, getting it running now, I'm going to remove, delete this. Okay. So we have this new app, Python 5, app convo log.py. And what we're going to see is the conversation that we'll have, we're going to be logging, and we can explore it afterwards. So let's now get another PDF. I'm going to choose OpenAI. Who is this? Okay, cool. So we've got a response there. What type of roles would it be suitable to reach out to them for? Okay. Business development, sales management, client relationship management, cool. I'm just going to do a quick test. Who is Hugo? There is no information provided about an individual named Hugo in the context. That's good. I just want to make sure my system's not making things up. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to kill this process and start it again because I want to have a new conversation. And finally, I don't have a reset conversation in that app. And maybe that's something you'd want to build into it, as in ChatGPT. You can start a new convo, right? So now let's OpenAI again. Who is this? Neil Fairweather. Okay, cool. Can you extract as JSON format structured in output about Neil all information that an HR recruiter would need to try to match them to a particular job, but speak like a pirate within the JSON? You've got to have some fun, right? And look, maybe if we're building a system like this, we want to have guardrails that'll stop you saying speak like a pirate and it not doing so, to be honest. Look, it's taking a while now, so we're getting code spam. This is pretty cool that I'm doing this all in code spaces as well, right? Oh, this is hilarious. Summary: a seasoned engineer and architect, skilled in the ways of distributed cloud-based systems, with a treasure trove of experience for the likes of AWS. It's very subtly a pirate, right? There may be more things up the top. No, that's actually really, that's fine. LLMs are rarely this subtle, right? But with a treasure trove of experience for the likes of. Very nice. OpenAI. I think I'm using GPT-4o. Okay, so let's now go back to the GitHub repository and interrupt. So before I show you, so we've logged this data. We can see this database here. Before I show you how we can start inspecting it, I'll just go back to the chat and see if there are any questions. Mistral OCR is absolutely fantastic. Great call, Christian. David's question, agent's memory has a temporal dimension, right? I mean, it depends what you mean by an agent. You can have, an agent is essentially something, an LLM equipped with a tool call, and you can have that without memory at all. Onyi has a great question. How can we implement this in production? You'll need to be more specific with respect to that. Production is a totally multi-dimensional space. I mean, something can be in production if I have it on a cloud service. Production can also mean I'm A/B testing things. It can mean I have load balancing. It can mean I have fallback options. So there are 100 different answers to your question, depending on how you would define production. I do think in the radar essay I linked to, which I can link to again, we answer a lot of those questions, but I'd need more information about what your actual question is. Oh, but I'm sorry, you then say, what considerations do we need to have in mind for production? Absolutely. So I think the things I've just mentioned. So the first thing is, does it run when you close your laptop? That's the first step towards production, right? Then if an API fails, what fallback mechanisms do you have? Can you handle the load of all the concurrent users you expect? What failure modes are there? How do you fix them, right? What is your evaluation framework? How can you tell if it's working? And in fact, well, no, Siri, I don't want anything to do with you. In fact, I am giving a talk in a couple of hours at ODSC more about productionizing AI systems and evaluation-driven development. And one of the most important questions is, how do I test whether my changes work? And this is the most common story I've seen across the board in consulting and teaching. Companies say, I have docs, let's build a retrieval system, maybe add an agent. Then they say, we shipped an MVP, does it work? Or they say, Gemini 2 just dropped, let's switch. And then they say to me, wait, how do I even test it? Okay, so the by far one of the most important things to think about in production is, how do I test the efficacy of my system? And that's something, time permitting, we can have a look at some of these slides later, but we'll be talking about that in far greater detail in my talk in several hours. So I do hope that's useful. But do let me know, Onyi, if you have any follow-up questions, please. Okay, so now what's super cool is we get to look at the traces from our conversation. And all I need to do is the command dataset, then the name of the database. Ooh. Brutal. Let me just see. Installing it again. Okay, yeah, there was something wacky happening there. Not sure what. Doesn't matter, because hopefully it works now. Okay, so what we see in dataset, pretty bare bones interface, but I really like it. We can see we have messages and we have conversations. So you may recall that I loaded up 2 different conversations. And so now we have these 2 different conversations and their IDs, right? So I click on one, and that's everything in this database, but it's linked to conversation IDs in messages. So let's look at those, okay? So this is cool. Now, the way I've logged this isn't prompt and response. I've logged them as individual rows, but you can join them in a variety of ways yourself or log them differently. But what you can see is I have the question, who is this? And you can see the answer. So let's actually order them by timestamp. So, and the interface here is really nice. So I have the user, me, said, who is this? Then the assistant said the individual is Neil Fairweather. The user said, that was me, can you extract a JSON format, structured output about Neil? All information that an HR recruiter would need and so on, and it did so, okay? Now, if we go home again and go once again to conversations, I'm going to go to the second one. I'm going to look at these 6 rows and order by timestamp. I asked, who is this? This individual is Shahrukh Baba, a business development manager. What type of role would it be suitable to reach out to them for? It'll be suitable for roles related to business development, sales management. We've already seen these, but now we're seeing that we actually have them logged. Then I say, who is Hugo? There is no information provided about an individual named Hugo in the context, okay? So all I want to say there is that now we're able to start to introspect into our system and what's working and what isn't. And I'll show you a bit more about how we need to approach that in a second, okay? We don't only want to be able to introspect into our systems, we want to be able to have a way to give feedback into our systems as quickly as possible, right? So before moving on to being able to give feedback, such as saying this reply worked, passes, this one failed, the reason it passed or the reason it's failed is so on. That's what we'll get to next. But I just want to tell you about some of the code that's changed here in order to build this. So we've used the thread local database connection to ensure each thread has its own connection to the SQLite database. And you can see that here. You can see it in the code. We create a new conversation ID and log it in the database. And then each user query and assistant response is logged. Now, you can log these together. I chose to log them separately. You can join them afterwards, but that's up to you. Of course, there are lots of frameworks that help you with all of this logging and observability, from, Logfire to Braintrust to Phoenix Arise. Now, a lot of these platforms, once again, abstract over too many of the details that we need as builders. And so a pattern I've seen time and time again is that people will adopt a framework like LangChain or LangGraph for other examples, then 12 to 18 months later, realize that they don't have enough visibility into their system on their own terms. And then they'll hand roll these things themselves internally. So I've given you a few exercises to do. You can run the code. You can use dataset to inspect the database, and you can try a bunch of queries in dataset. So that's the other thing. And I'll show you next time we're in dataset in a minute how this works. But you can, execute query, SQL, I'm sorry. You can also export as a CSV and these types of things, right? So once again, why do we even care about this? It matters because if you want to build reliable software, how do you know it's reliable? And the only way to know something's reliable is to be able to introspect into it and inspect it and see that the responses are responses that you can trust and responses that you would pass, right? Now, a lot of people come to me and say, oh, Hugo, can't we get an agent to do that? And I always say, maybe, but it's always human learning before machine learning before agentic learning, right? This is old, and this is what I talk about in my talk in an hour or two. This is what we've been doing in machine learning for over a decade, right? Where you have some sort of labeled data that we know we can trust somewhat, and then we use that to evaluate further iterations of our system. So I honestly think you can't avoid hand labeling things. Machine learning is to scale what humans can do, right? So in order to actually build trust with a system, we need to be able to look at it and believe with our eyes that it's working in the way we'd want it to. And so observability and monitoring allows us to do this. Logging provides insights into how users are interacting with your app and helps identify issues, areas for improvement. Monitoring, I mean, if you have a complete record of interactions, you can analyze trends, debug, even use data for future training, okay? So really excited to see what you all do with observability, monitoring, and logging. The next iteration is actually one of my favorites, where we start being able to add evaluation with user feedback, okay? So what we're gonna do is introduce a way to evaluate the AI's response, right? So users can now provide feedback with a thumbs up or thumbs down. This feedback is logged to our local SQLite database, and it'll help us measure and improve the quality of the app's responses over time. So I'm going to do that. I'm just going to pop back to the chat. Fantastic. Yes, and Pratik, that is my talk. I really appreciate you being clear about that. Onyi, by production, you mean implementing this for a small organization with about 50 employees. And so are you looking at building a system solely for internal employees, or are you looking to serve it externally? So if you're looking for something with about 50 employees, I mean, I would encourage you to, build something using a framework, using a platform like Modal, for example, a serverless platform which allows you to spin up an app really quickly and have a robust backend which you can evaluate. If you're doing something internally, you have a lot more freedom to make mistakes as well. And in all honesty, if you're doing something externally, I always encourage people to roll it out internally beforehand. Now, something you can do, and this is a big part of my talk later today, is before you even roll something out, you can generate synthetic data that allows you to test your system, okay? So what you want to make sure is that it answers somewhat well the types of questions you think people will ask. And how do you build that system, right? How do you build that testing system? You have a one-page product spec. What do you want people to do with it, right? You then define personas, you define scenarios they'll use it. Then you can synthetically generate a bunch of questions and see how the system responds. So those are the types of things that take you towards productionization. Then you want to make sure that you catch error modes and have fallback mechanisms if parts of it fail. And you want to manage the load if 50 people are using it concurrently, for example. Okay. So I hope that's helpful. Please do feel free to ask follow-up questions. These are fantastic questions. So please do feel free to ask follow-up questions in the chat. Having said that, now it is with great pleasure that I will show you the next iteration of the app, which is Python. Getting so excited I can barely spell. 6 app rate answer. I just want to say we're still doing this all from code spaces, which I'm actually I think is so cool. So who is this? Okay, Sachin Jain. So actually, let's have a look. Okay, that's correct. Remember, you want to check it against what ground truth you have. So I'm going to give it a +1, okay? Then I'm going to ask, who is Hugo? Hugo, okay. I'm going to give that a +1 as well. Then I'm going to ask, I'm going to try to trick it maybe. Why is this? Oh, that's great. Okay, so I've actually got 3 responses, and I'm not going to bother trying to trick it anymore, to be honest. But we've got 3 responses, which I'm pretty happy with, and gave +1 to all of them. And you can see we actually have that logged here. We can see that I've added output there, right? And now what I can do is I can once again introspect into my data set into my data with dataset, right? So we should have more conversations. We have one more conversation. This is the one we haven't looked at yet. 6 rows. Super cool. Now, where's the feedback? Now, of course, I haven't, in order to separate concerns, I actually haven't got the feedback there. We have another table called feedback, right? And we have the IDs and message IDs, and then the feedback, which will allow us to join things later on, okay? Now, what I want to say is you can view and edit SQL here. You can write SQL and do your queries. It works wonderfully. You can also, as I said before, look at a CSV, right? And if I wanted to download it as a CSV, I can do that. And let's now just look at downloads. Thanks, numbers. Okay, great. This is super cool. Now, you may say, why am I opening a spreadsheet, Hugo? And this actually, I suppose it is time to dive into this a bit. But, and once again, if you do want to come to my talk later, I very much welcome it. Because you seem like a really interesting crowd as well. You're asking such wonderful questions. But just to your point before, Onyi, this may seem silly, but a huge way to productionizing is actually defining the goal, the user scenarios. And when you answer these, you can start a data flywheel and build a minimum viable evaluation loop before you even launch. And that's what I talk about in the talk I'll be giving. And there won't be any hands-on code there. But the real point and why I'm showing this to you now is, let me find this. So once you've logged your traces in a spreadsheet, you've got a prompt and a response and a variety of other things, right? You add columns, or if you've already logged it, you've got them. You want to accept or reject a response. You want to then have a reason for accepting or rejecting a response. Then you want to classify the failure mode. Is it a hallucination? Is it a retrieval issue? Is it a format issue? Then you can do a pivot table, and I'll show you exactly what this looks like in 20 to 30 seconds. Do a pivot table. Then you can rank the failure modes by frequency, and then you can have actionable frequency fixes, such as prompt engineering, changing your chunking strategy in RAG, fine-tuning. So let's have a look at what this table actually, and people, like, literally a huge part of my job is helping people de-learn, or we want to use LLM as a judge and agentic judges and that type of stuff. It takes me weeks and months to help people de-learn this stuff. But hopefully you can get a lot of this now. What you do, if you have, rows of your input and output and the ground truth, you can then accept and fail and give a reason, or the failure mode. Okay, so let's say the input is summarize the dog, summarize the doc, and the output is dogs are cool, but the ground truth is it's actually a company summary report. That's a fail, and the failure mode is a hallucination. If the input is get the CEO name, and the LM output is John Doe, but the ground truth is Jane Smith, that's a fail, but it's actually a retrieval error, which is different failure mode. If I'm going to skip this one because it's an accept, so there's no failure mode. If the input is summarize the report discusses sales, but the ground truth is the report discusses sales, revenue, breakdown, and customer trends, fail, and it's an incomplete response. Now, I also just want to say that even figuring out whether to give a summary pass or fail is non-obvious, right? And that's why we force you to do it. There are trade-offs, right? You want it to contain, a summary should contain all relevant information. It should be concise. So is it complete? Is it concise? And there are trade-offs between these two. There are 5 or 6 different ways you could measure, is a summary good? But in order to improve your system, you need to give it a pass or fail. You don't want to give it like a score between 1 and 5, because how do you fix a 3, right? So we really want to force you as builders to give passes or fails to help build your system in the early phases. Now, then I say do a pivot table. What am I talking about there? I'm literally talking about rank ordering the failure modes. And for example, we may see that hallucinations occur 30% of the time, retrieval errors 25% of the time, incomplete responses 20%, formatting issues 15%, other 10%. So why do I even care about this? So for example, perhaps when I initially look at the data or the complaints I get, it's formatting issues that people complain about that are most obvious, right? Now, of course, I want to fix those. But after we've done this failure mode analysis and done our pivot table in a spreadsheet, my people, right? Also, by the way, in Google Sheets, you can actually have LLMs in Google Sheets in cells. And Paige Bailey from DeepMind came and gave a talk on this in the most recent cohort of a course I teach, a Maven course, which a lot of this is from, actually. But if you look at your system and think, oh, format issues are the biggest issues because they're more salient but less relevant, you may then spend a lot of time fixing formatting issues and get only 15% lift on your model performance. Whereas if you do this failure mode analysis, which doesn't take that long, and you're like, if I focus on hallucinations and retrieval error, then you'll get 55% lift on your performance. So that's all to say, that's all to justify why this type of failure mode analysis is incredibly important and why logging is so important. Yes, it is modal.com, and I will. Whoa, this is getting freaky now. Not sure what happened there. Let's see. Okay. Yes, exactly. So we'll copy that link again. And Ryan has already pasted it. So that was, I do want to say, just also check out their exam. I wonder, they've got a dashboard. Maybe you need to be logged in to see this. No, this is, so my friend Charles Fry is a developer advocate there, and just look, the type of things they've built. This is an example I use in my course as well, where you can do fine tuning on images of your pet in order to generate a bunch of stuff of them. And by the way, Modal has never paid me any money. I've never been on their never been salaried by them. I do want to say they do sponsor the course I teach on Maven. They've very generously given all students $1,000 in credits for the past 2 cohorts. So although they don't pay me, they are very generous. But that isn't the reason they do that, is because I love their product so much and ask them to. It doesn't work. I don't promote them because they do that. They do it because I love them, essentially. So let's go back to our notebook, if I can find it now. And sincerest. It will be here. Yeah. Oof. Okay, I'm just going to open this code space one more time. I know this is quite silly, but it's the easiest way to get back to it. So while that's just loading again, I'm very happy to answer any other questions. And I just love all the questions here as well. You all are, so engaged. And for those, while we're waiting for that, for those who missed it, I will share the link. Oh, yeah, cool. Actually, I'll also, this is, oof. Okay, I'm just going to share that. The link is at the bottom. This is the link of the live stream, the 2.5 hour live stream I did with Ravin from DeepMind about building local agents, essentially. I do want to just once again find invites. Yes, so for those who do want to chat more about these types of things, please do join our community Discord as well. It'll be super fun to have you there. Okay, it looks like getting back to the code space may take a minute. So if anyone has any questions, I'd be more than excited to answer them. Actually, I wonder. Okay, no, I've got another version of it here. Okay. Also, I have started using Arc recently as a browser, and I find it fantastic in many ways. But there are a few frustrations, such as the one I just showed you. Okay, so what's up next? Let's go down. So we've added, I'm just going to remove those Discord pings now. We've added feedback, which allows us to then improve and iterate on our app, right? So collecting feedback is essential for refining the performance and understanding how users perceive the quality of the responses. And it allows us to do data-driven iteration. By logging feedback, we can identify patterns in user satisfaction, make informed decisions about model updates or changes. You'll note that ChatGPT, for example, will offer you two options sometimes and ask you which response you like more. That's one way to get feedback, right? A lot of AI products will say, this is, experimental. Was the response helpful? And that type of stuff, right? So that's essentially what we're talking about here. So what I want you to do is to use the app to extract structured information, play around with it, try different requests, get the LLM to adopt the role as a recruiter, for example. Ask for structured output and give it thumbs up and thumbs down and see what's up there, right? So let's now step back a bit. After we've been through a lot of code and a lot of fun, well, what I find fun apps, and I hope you all did as well, we've already engaged with several key concepts from the software development lifecycle for AI. So what we've done is the process we've been following, we've been building, observing, and iterating on our app. This embodies the SDLC for generative AI, accounting for iteration needs, observability, and feedback mechanisms. We've started thinking about evaluating model output using thumbs up, thumbs down feedback mechanism, and begun evaluating model performance and understanding which prompts work better. We've also done prompt engineering, or talked about it at least, explored experimenting with different prompts and observing which ones yield the best results in our apps. And the thumbs up, thumbs down helps with that. So now what I want to dive into is not quite app building, but thinking through how to utilize vendor APIs as well as possible, right? So we're not going to explore Grok, but we're going to explore OpenAI and Anthropic, and you can easily modulate the code here to Gemini and Grok. And Grok is really cool. It's got a free tier with a lot of different LLMs. We're going to discuss their features, limitations, and when to use them. We're going to look at API settings, such as which we call knobs, so control parameters like temperature. There's max tokens, top P, these types of things. We're also going to just understand a bit more about the non-deterministic nature. This means that responses can vary even with the same input. We'll talk about how to handle this in practice. Now, a lot of the time with LLMs, we don't even have the same input, right? And we'll talk a bit more about embeddings, time permitting as well. So let's now dive into hitting vendor APIs. So we kind of took this for granted already. So we're going to actually see how it works now. We're going to set up API access. We're going to make basic calls and customize model behavior. So first, we need to set a key. And I've done that here. I've set my key. Right? And then, so I've executed this before, but I'm going to execute it all again. Okay, so, I set up my client. I'm using the completion create endpoint and GPT 3.5 Turbo. Okay, so I'm going to ask it to tell me a joke. And I wouldn't worry too much about this API here. It's kind of annoying, but I do encourage everyone to use AI coding assistants these days. So they'll write this code for you, even though they're not always great at modern ChatGPT, for example, doesn't always know its own API, and it can be infuriating. But so I asked it to tell me a joke, and I'm actually going to clear all outputs and do this again. So tell me a joke. And what we'll see is the message. It's a chat completion message. So we need to extract the content. But why did the Scarecrow win an award? Because he was outstanding in his field. Brilliant, right? Like the dad jokes that come out of these systems are absolutely fascinating. And I wonder whether that's due to the reinforcement learning via human feedback or DPO in Anthropic's case, or just the majority of jokes on the internet are quote unquote dad jokes. Who knows? May not even be an interesting question. But what you'll note is that, far out, we need to do like the completion, then we need to take choices, then slice that, then dot message. And we still don't even get the bloody thing, right? Pardon my language, but I am Australian, deep down and on the surface. What we need to do to get the actual content is then dot content, right? So let's do that. Why did the Scarecrow win an award? Because he was outstanding in his field. Brilliant. Now, we've seen prompt and response here. And we saw that we gave it user. The role was user, and then we gave it the content, tell me a joke. Now, there's another type of role we can take on, which is the system prompt. And what this does is it sets the stage for how we want the LLM to respond, which can be very useful if we want to chat with something that, we want it to be a polite HR assistant or something like that. It can be very useful. And in fact, I don't know if you all saw this. This is pretty out there, actually. And I'm sorry for going to LinkedIn. Also, if you all want to connect on LinkedIn, please do. I did post yesterday, and I'll share this link. That Claude's system prompt has been leaked. Okay. And I've linked to it in a comment. It's a 24,000 token system prompt. You can see how they specify Claude artifacts here. It's actually incredibly interesting. And it's a very interesting question that I think about a lot. System prompts are considered proprietary IP. Like if you write a system prompt in one of your products, you don't want people to be able to extract that, right? Having said that, they increasingly shape how information is filtered, cited, and surfaced. So they kind of seem like public infrastructure as well. And Jag, I hope I pronounced your name correctly. Apologies if I didn't. You can, actually, you say, I have an endless supply of these jokes. I mean, essentially, I'm going to be a bit naughty now, but tell me, this is one of the problems with these systems, right? Like, the cost of generating tokens and content is close to zero now. So I'm asking it to tell me 20 dad jokes. It's going to take a bit longer. It formatted them nice. Why couldn't the bicycle find its way home? It lost its bearings. How does a penguin build its house? It glues it together. That's absolutely absurd. It's a hilariously dumb joke. Also, penguins are in the South Pole, well, in Antarctica, and igloos in the north of the world, right? Dad, can you put my shoes on? No, I don't think they'll fit me. Oh, very, very good. I used to play piano by ear, but now I use my hands. I'm sorry. I hope, this is part of the issue. Not only can you have an endless supply, you don't even have to, whiter cows have hooves instead of feet because they lack toes. Okay, I'm sorry. We're going to keep moving on. But really do think about the importance of system prompts. And this is an example, a silly example, but a telling example. I've given it the system prompt, you are Mario from Super Mario Brothers. Answer is Mario, the assistant only. And I've said, where do you live? And it responds, it's a me, Mario. I live in the Mushroom Kingdom. Pretty cool. Now, that's the OpenAI API. Now, I want to show you the Anthropic API, and then I'm actually going to get both these APIs chatting together, which is always fun. So once again, what we do is we set up the API access with a key, customize model, behavior using system prompt, and then experiment with responses. And I I don't think I had Anthropic in the environment here, but now I do. And I set my key here. And what I do is I'm setting a few things. The API is slightly different, but I'm saying respond only in Yoda speak. And I'm saying, how are you today? So let's see the response. This API is a bit nicer as well. You can just get message.content. I know, of course it isn't. I need to extract things. It's content0.text, but that's better. Speaks in Yoda voice. Well, I am today. The force strong it is within me. A good day it has been. And you, how fare you? Okay, pretty cool, right? Now I'm going to do something a bit silly, but it's fun and it's demonstrative of the capabilities of these types of models. So we've just used the OpenAI API to get an assistant that sounds like Mario, and use the Claude API to get an assistant that sounds like Yoda. So why wouldn't we get them to have a conversation? I'd have to fire myself if I didn't do that, right? So in the following code, I'm going to set up these characters, set up a conversation loop, have system prompts with Yoda and Mario, and see what's up, okay? So I'm going to start running this code. I'm just using some nice Python display to have the HTML a bit nicer. You can see the OpenAI response. Once again, you are Mario. Get Anthropic response, respond in Yoda speak. I need an initial message to set the conversation. Then in a for loop, I'm just setting the conversation where I get OpenAI to respond to the initial message. So getting Mario to respond, then getting Yoda to respond, and I've got this loop 5 times. And we see, it's me, Mario. I live in the Mushroom Kingdom where I protect Princess Peach from Bowser's evil schemes. Yoda replies, in the Mushroom Kingdom you live, Mario. Okay. And then Mario replies, it's a me, Mario. He always opens like that because pretty much I told him to. And you can see it's Yoda says, speak like Mario, I cannot. Yoda, I am. In Yoda speak, respond, I must. So it's actually, it looks like the Claude Yoda is kind of thinks he's being infiltrated by Mario speak, so he needs to protect his own language. And look, they're kind of reflecting each other. It isn't necessarily a super interesting conversation. And once again, it's because there's no history in it, right? I'm literally getting them to respond to each one in sequence. So that you could add history to that. That's something that could be fun. And having said all that, I'm then going to go into handling conversation history with the OpenAI API. But before that, I'll go back to the questions and see if there's anything there. No, it looks like we're all good. Great. And we do have just over 15 minutes left, so please do ask any questions. So we've talked about this, right? But when building software that requires continuous conversation or interaction, and look, you may not need this system. And I apologize that I jump around a bit here, but I actually think it's incredibly useful. Honeycomb, LLM, Philip, Carter, query language. This is a friend of mine, Philip, who at Honeycomb, he built essentially one of the first LLM-powered pieces of software for a SaaS company outside the big labs. And so I'm gonna paste his blog post here, but I very much encourage you all to look at the work they did there. The reason it came up for me now is it's a single turn conversation. It's a really good use case of LLM-powered software, but you write something in natural language and it gives you Honeycombs. You can think of it as SQL query. It's a different type of query language, but for this conversation, it doesn't matter. And all you do is you give it English, you say how you want to query it, and it gives you the Honeycomb query for it. There's no back and forth, right? And it was a very useful product for a lot of their users. So I just want to make clear that spec out what you want from a product, and it may not involve a multi-turn conversation. And know that multi-turn conversations get incredibly complex, like even in terms of thinking how your system is working, right? looking at the traces, giving +1, -1, giving reasons, improving your system with multi-turn conversations can be totally brutal. Having said that, what I want to demonstrate, and it's something we talked about earlier, is just a basic way of thinking through memory. Okay, so let's now have a look at what I'm doing here. So I'm initializing the client. I'm initializing the conversation history. Then I'm giving chat with memory. And essentially what I'm doing is I'm appending the previous part of the conversation to it. So what we're going to get out is the whole conversation. And then I'm getting the API response. And then I'm appending the response as well. So let's execute that. And now I'm going to say, my name is Hugo, and then pass it there and see what the response is. Nice to meet you, Hugo. How can I assist you today? Now I'm going to say, what's my name? And it says, your name is Hugo. How can I help you further, Hugo? Let's look at the conversation history. And it's exactly what we've just said, essentially. And the reason it knew my name was Hugo is because it had stored it in the history in this kind of conversational manner with essentially dictionaries or JSON of the preceding parts of the conversation. Now, the next section is about controlling model behavior. We don't have enough time to go into this too deeply, but what do I want to say? Firstly, all of this is in the notebook, so you can go in it at your own pace afterwards, and we can chat on Discord about it for sure. But I just want to introduce you to some of the parameters you can use, such as temperature. It's a parameter that controls the randomness of the model's output. Okay, so a lower temperature produces predictable and precise responses. This is great for applications that require consistency, like customer service chatbots. Higher temperature encourages creativity and leads to more varied and unexpected responses. And you may not want this for like reliable production grade software, but if you building something to ideate with yourself, or you're on a content team and want like ideas about, marketing campaigns and that type of stuff, it can be incredibly useful for brainstorming, creative writing, and generating unique ideas. So I'm going to give an example with Mario as a system prompt, and we're going to explore how different temperatures impact the responses, right? So I'm going 0.1, 0.5, 1.52. And actually, a lot of models and APIs, it's from 0 to 1, their temperature. And several, including OpenAI, go up to 2, which is annoying, to be honest. It'd be nice to have standardization, but it is early on in the space. Also, for example, we looked at getting structured output before from LinkedIn profiles. In that case, temperature 0, seriously, like we want consistent responses there. So let's have a look at this. My prompt was, tell me about your day. So temperature 1, it's a me, Mario, very busy day, went on an adventure, saved Princess Peach, jumped over Goombas, collected coins, found some power-ups like the super mushroom and fire flower. Cool. Then a bit more, jumping on Goombas, collecting coins. Mamma mia, it was up. And we've got a token limit there, I think, which is why, max tokens is equal to 50, which you may want to set for cost reasons as well. Now, if you do that, right, you want to make sure you're not serving something that doesn't end to a user. So you'll want tests and guardrails around that. And Anya, I hope that helps with thinking through. Another thing, part of your evaluations is a testing suite as well. Now, you can see as it goes up and up and up. Let's have a look at temperature 2. It's a me, Mario. Wahoo! My day was incredibly stressful, like this la, running through soft forms, sprites and bubbles, curling Vardig over. I mean, this is wild. I mean, right. So it ceases being English. Gives me file name. Looks a bit German. We've got a bunch of other languages happening there as well. So that's all to say. 2 is clearly too much, but perhaps if you want more creativity, somewhere between 0.5 and 1.5 is what you'd like there. Now, most people know something about temperature. I'm just going to check in the chat to see. No, we're all good. Most people know about temperature. I do want to talk briefly about top P, which can be useful as well. What it does is it manages the diversity of responses by filtering output based on cumulative probability. So A low top P constrains the choices to the most likely output, and this results in predictable outputs. High top P allows for a broader selection, right? Fosters creativity and variability in responses. So what does that mean about interactions between temperature and top P? So think about top P first. A high top P means there's a broader selection of tokens to choose from. Temperature really says how often it will sample from the less probable ones. So lower temperature, even if you have a high top P, will sample from the more likely ones. If you have a low top P, you're constraining the space already, essentially. So that's how to think about interactions between these. Now, I'm not going to go through all of these examples, but I definitely encourage you all to, okay? And in our exploration, I mean, we go through adventure book titles, varying top P, and then we go through combining temperature and top P to balance creativity and coherence. And I encourage you all to, so in the first section, we have moderate temperature with high top P. Then we introduce it to low temperature with high top P and vice versa. I want you to go through that yourself because I did want to say something just about prompt templates. We've already seen the role of system prompts, but top prompt templates are incredibly important, which are structured formats designed to guide language models in generating specific types of output, okay? So why would we even want templates? First, actually, let me show you what a template is, an example, right? So this is a prompt template where we're asking it to create an engaging social media post for the following product. So we tell it what the product is, we tell it what the audience is, and we tell it what the key message is. Now, why would we want a prompt template or a function like this? Essentially, it improves consistency. So it ensures the response adheres to a specific structure, which is crucial in fields like marketing, where maintaining a consistent brand voice is important. Time efficiency, it allows for the reuse of formats. So, for example, when I post about this workshop on LinkedIn, I'll use an LLM to help me. And I have a prompt template, which is, hey, take the content from this and give it in a digestible form with these several things for a LinkedIn post, for example. It also provides guidance for the model, right? On top of that, it may seem constraining, but it does allow for flexibility and creativity. So while templates provide structure, they also allow for creative input. So in creative industries, templates can be used for brainstorming ideas while still providing a clear framework. So I just want to give you this example. So in a marketing context, a prompt template might be structured to generate engaging social media posts. You could have fields for product, as we've seen, target audience, and key message. So let's now do this. And what am I giving it? I'm giving it organic coffee, health-conscious consumers, sustainable sourcing. Great. Suggested social media post. Rise and shine with a guilt-free brew. Hey, coffee lovers, are you ready to elevate your morning ritual? And so on, right? And you can see eco-friendly practices, supporting farmers who care for the planet as much as we do. So it is focused around sustainable sourcing and for health-conscious consumers. Now, I'm going to do one more, which is a SaaS product that generates dad jokes. Hilarious dads who love annoying their kids with dad jokes. And then messaging. The key message is, these are the funniest dad jokes you'll ever hear. Now, of course, I'm being a bit silly here, but I'm just showing how prompt templates can really help. Suggested social media post. It gives, hey there, hilarious dads. Ready to take your dad joke game to a whole new level? Introducing our new SaaS product that generates the funniest dad jokes you'll ever hear. Whether you're at the dinner table, why did the dad joke cross the road? To make you laugh and roll your eyes. Okay, this could do with a bit of work, to be honest. But once again, we're seeing the importance of prompt iteration and prompt engineering there as well. So I have included some best practices for using prompt templates, such as defining clear objectives, incorporating flexibility, using specific language, testing and iterating, and maintaining context, as well as leveraging existing templates and combining all of these techniques. But I encourage you all to play around with them for use cases that help you at work and personally as well. There is a brief section on introducing LangChain to help you with these types of things that we're not going to go through now. But what I want to do, we've got a few minutes left to wrap up, is just essentially to remind us of what we've done here. Okay, so let me... So we've really focused on the software development lifecycle for AI applications. So realizing it's a non-deterministic process, emphasizing the importance of continuous evaluation, logging, and iteration. We've jumped into retrieval augmented generation with an MVP. And in 5 lines of code, we're able to get something up and running. We're able to break down the MVP and walk through all components of the app, explaining how it fits into the broader AI workflow. We've looked at vendor APIs and prompt engineering and all their different knobs. We've talked about structured outputs, and we've kind of dived into embeddings and in passing, looked at vector stores. We've talked about logging and evaluation and how to set up a simple logging system using SQLite to track queries and responses for further analysis, and really thinking through evaluating output. So introducing basic evaluation strategies like thumbs up, thumbs down feedback, and explaining why evaluation is crucial. I think that's a great place to wrap up on, and it dovetails really nicely with the talk that I have coming up. If you're not able to make it, I do encourage you to check it out later, or connect on LinkedIn, and I can send you some resources around the types of things that I talk about there. I do want to say, so maybe we can stop sharing my screen, Elle. I do want to say that in terms of productionizing things, this was a deep dive into the types of code you can easily write to start bootstrapping and developing LLM-powered applications. I do think my next talk, really, there's no code, but it's about the heuristics and thinking behind having reliable evaluation if you want to build reliable software. And that's really the next step here. So the point here was to take you through important pieces of code that hopefully you can use as templates for before your own work. Mijan, that's a great question. There actually aren't very good reference articles with respect to how temperature and top P work behind the scenes, particularly in conjunction. But if you join our Discord, I've actually got some notebooks for it, which I'll be able to help with there if you ping me there. I'm just wondering, I'm just going to paste. It doesn't look like. Elle, are you able to help me pin this Discord note to?
Yeah, sure.
That'd be great. So yeah, please do feel free to ping me there or on LinkedIn. And I think that's probably. Oh no, there is one more thing. We'll actually. Can you still see my screen, Elle?
Oh, okay, hold on. Okay, it's showing now.
Cool. So I did mention that I do teach a course on this, and a lot of the stuff we're talking about here, I go into a lot more detail. And I do have another cohort coming up in July. And if you do want to join, I'm very happy to help and chat about all these things otherwise, but if this is of interest, please do check it out. And because I've been friends with ODSC for over a decade now, wow. You can use this coupon ODSC Friends, or scan this QR code, or get the discount here to get $200 off as well. But it's a month-long course with 2-hour sessions weekly, and we do a lot of the stuff on Discord as well, and a lot of guest lectures, and we provision modal credits and Google Cloud credits and those types of things as well. So if that's of interest, please do get in touch and ping me about it. But I'd just love to thank you all for being so incredibly engaged and having such wonderful questions. Vivian, you've got a great question. The voice to text, I'm using an application called Super Whisper. Yeah. And Eric, that's a great point. I can actually do it on Zoom easily. It's just that StreamYard is browser based, so that's what makes it challenging. But I do appreciate it very, very much. But thank you all for such wonderful questions, and I hope we get to connect on Discord or LinkedIn or wherever it may be.